The transport ship Meridian's Dream drifted silently through the asteroid field, its hull scarred from micrometeorite impacts during the 3-month journey to the outer colonies. Captain Elena Rodriguez checked the navigation display for the 100th time that day, her weathered fingers tracing the route that would take them safely through the treacherous rock formations. The ship carried a mixed cargo of mining equipment, medical supplies, and 5 passengers heading to the frontier worlds where humanity was still carving out a foothold among the stars. In the passenger compartment, the 5 humans sat in various states of rest and boredom. Sarah Chun, a xenobiologist fresh out of the Mars Academy, nervously reviewed her research notes on potentially habitable worlds. Beside her, Dr. Marcus Webb, a graying physician with gentle eyes, quietly read an old paper book, something rare in an age of digital everything. The other 3 passengers seemed unremarkable at first glance. Jake Morrison appeared to be a simple construction worker, his calloused hands and weathered face telling stories of hard labor under alien suns. Tom Bradley looked like a mechanic or technician, constantly tinkering with small electronic devices he pulled from his pockets. The 5th passenger, Alex Kane, sat apart from the others, seemingly asleep, but maintaining the kind of stillness that suggested a deeper awareness of his surroundings. His dark hair was cut short, and, despite his relaxed posture, there was something about the way he carried himself that spoke of discipline and training. None of the other passengers knew that Jake Morrison had spent 8 years as a United States Marine, serving in conflicts across 3 different star systems. They also had no idea that Alex Kane was a Navy SEAL who had participated in classified operations that would remain secret for decades to come. The attack came without warning. One moment the ship was gliding peacefully through space, and the next, crackling energy beams erupted from hidden positions among the asteroids. The ship's shields flared to life, casting an eerie blue glow throughout the passenger compartment as the defensive systems struggled against the assault. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled over the intercom, tight with controlled panic. "All passengers, secure yourselves immediately. We're under attack by unknown vessels. Repeat, we are under attack." The attackers were Zephyrians, a species that had been raiding human shipping lanes for the past 5 years. Standing nearly 8 feet tall with chitinous exoskeletons that gleamed like polished metal, they moved with an insectoid grace that made them formidable opponents in hand-to-hand combat. Their ships were sleek, organic-looking vessels that seemed to grow rather than being built, equipped with weapons that could slice through most human defenses like a hot knife through butter. Commander Zach Th watched the human ship's shields collapse on his tactical display, mandibles clicking with satisfaction. These soft-skinned creatures had been expanding too aggressively into Zephyrian space, and it was time to send a message. His warriors would board the vessel, take prisoners, and learn everything they could about human military capabilities and colony locations. The intelligence gathered would be invaluable for future raids. The boarding pods attached to the Meridian's Dream with metallic thuds that echoed throughout the ship. Sarah Chun whimpered as the lights flickered, and the artificial gravity wavered. Dr. Webb reached over to steady her, his medical training keeping him calm even in crisis. Jake and Alex exchanged a quick glance, a moment of recognition passing between 2 warriors who understood that their peaceful journey had just become something entirely different. Within minutes, the Zephyrian warriors had cut through the airlocks and were moving through the ship with methodical efficiency. Their footsteps created an unsettling rhythm against the deck plating, like massive insects scuttling through the corridors. Captain Rodriguez and her crew put up a brief fight, but they were civilian spacers with basic training, not combat veterans. The advanced Zephyrian weapons made short work of any resistance. When the aliens reached the passenger compartment, they found 5 terrified humans huddled together. At least, that's what it looked like to their alien perception. Zephyrians had excellent vision and could detect heat signatures, but they couldn't read the subtle body language that would have told them Jake Morrison was calculating firing angles, and Alex Kane was memorizing the aliens' movement patterns and equipment configurations. 5 specimens, hissed Subcommander Veltar, his translator device rendering his words into human language. The soft ones will provide excellent information about their species' weaknesses. The Zephyrians bound the humans with energy restraints that felt like bands of solid light around their wrists and ankles. The restraints were designed to be completely escape-proof against human physiology, calculated to deliver painful shocks if the prisoners attempted to break free. Dr. Webb cried out as the energy bands tightened around his elderly frame, while Sarah sobbed quietly, overwhelmed by the nightmare her scientific expedition had become. Tom Bradley, the supposed technician, remained silent as he was dragged along with the others. In reality, he was a former Army Ranger who had transitioned to private security work, and his mind was already working on the problem of their captivity. Like Jake and Alex, he recognized that their best chance of survival lay in maintaining their cover as helpless civilians while gathering intelligence on their captors. The Zephyrian ship was a marvel of biotechnology, its corridors lined with surfaces that pulsed with organic life. Bioluminescent strips provided a sickly green illumination that hurt human eyes, while the air carried a metallic taste that made breathing uncomfortable. The gravity was slightly heavier than Earth normal, designed to accommodate the Zephyrians' larger frames and denser bone structure. The 5 humans were thrown into a holding cell that had obviously been designed with other species in mind. The ceiling was too high, the walls curved in ways that felt wrong to human spatial perception, and the floor had a texture that seemed to shift under their feet. A force field hummed across the entrance, creating a barrier that would deliver a lethal shock to anyone foolish enough to touch it. "What do they want with us?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible above the alien ship's background noise. Dr. Webb looked around their prison with clinical interest, his medical mind cataloging details that might prove useful later. "Information, most likely. They'll want to know about our colonies, our defenses, our technology." "They picked the wrong ship," Jake muttered under his breath, quiet enough that only Alex and Tom could hear him. The 3 military men shared another look, an entire conversation passing between them in silence. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped aboard an alien vessel light years from any possible rescue. But they were far from helpless. The Zephyrians had made a critical error in their assessment. They saw 5 soft humans, easy prey that would break quickly under interrogation. They failed to recognize that 3 of their prisoners were among the most highly trained warriors humanity had ever produced, men who had survived impossible odds in conflicts across the galaxy. More importantly, they had no understanding of the human capacity for adaptation, determination, and sheer bloody-minded refusal to give up. Commander Zach Th reviewed the intelligence reports on human psychology as his ship set course for the primary Zephyrian base. According to their research, humans were social creatures who formed strong emotional bonds with each other. Threatening one would make the others more compliant. They were also supposed to be physically weak compared to Zephyrians, with inferior reflexes and limited ability to function under stress. The commander's mandibles clicked in what passed for Zephyrian laughter. These humans would provide valuable test subjects for new interrogation techniques, and their eventual fate would serve as a warning to other human ships that dared to venture into claimed Zephyrian territory. It would be several hours before they reached the base, giving his warriors time to prepare the interrogation chambers. In the holding cell, Alex Kane was using meditation techniques learned during SEAL training to slow his heartbeat and control his breathing. To any observer, he appeared to be sleeping, but his mind was razor-sharp, analyzing every detail of their situation. The force field operated on a standard electromagnetic frequency that could potentially be disrupted. The guards followed a predictable patrol pattern. Most importantly, the Zephyrians clearly didn't consider their prisoners a threat. Jake Morrison was conducting his own reconnaissance, using peripheral vision to study the cell's construction while appearing to comfort Sarah Chun. The walls were some kind of living metal that responded to touch, probably equipped with sensors to monitor the prisoner's vital signs. The lock mechanism was biometric, keyed to Zephyrian physiology, but, like all locks, it had weaknesses if you knew where to look. Tom Bradley sat against the far wall, his fingers working on one of the small electronic devices he'd been carrying. To casual observation, he was nervously fidgeting, but he was actually modifying the device's internal components. Years of experience with alien technology had taught him that most species used similar principles in their electronics, even if the execution was different. With the right modifications, a simple human tool could potentially interface with Zephyrian systems. Dr. Webb and Sarah represented the unknown factors in their group. Webb was clearly intelligent and observant, but his civilian background meant he might panic under pressure. Sarah was young and terrified, which could be either a liability or an asset depending on how she reacted when the situation deteriorated further. The ship shuddered slightly as it dropped out of faster-than-light travel, indicating they were approaching their destination. Through the cell's single viewport, the humans could see a massive space station that looked like it had been grown rather than built. Organic curves swept across its surface, punctuated by weapon emplacements and docking bays that resembled giant mouths ready to swallow approaching vessels. Zephyrian Prime Base, one of the guards announced, his translator making the words sound mechanical and lifeless. Your new home, soft ones. You will learn to appreciate Zephyrian hospitality before your short lives end. Alex opened his eyes and met the alien's gaze steadily. Thank you for the warning, he said calmly, his voice carrying no trace of fear. The Zephyrian guard tilted his head, confused by the human's lack of terror. In that moment of confusion, Alex filed away another piece of useful information about their captors. The docking procedure took nearly an hour, during which the humans were subjected to various scans and probes as the Zephyrians documented their new acquisitions. The aliens were thorough, measuring everything from bone density to brain activity, but they failed to recognize the telltale signs of advanced military conditioning that would have been obvious to a human observer. When the ship finally docked, the prisoners were marched through corridors filled with other captives from dozens of different species. Some were clearly civilians, huddled together in despair, while others showed signs of having been imprisoned for extended periods. The variety of alien life was staggering, but none of it brought comfort to the human prisoners. Their destination was an interrogation facility deep within the station, where the Zephyrians had perfected techniques for extracting information from unwilling subjects. The walls were lined with devices whose purposes were unmistakably sinister, while the air carried the lingering scent of fear and pain from previous victims. As they were separated into individual cells, each human was left alone with their thoughts, and the growing realization that escape would require something approaching a miracle. But sometimes, miracles came in the form of 3 highly trained warriors who had sworn an oath to never leave a fellow human behind, no matter what the cost. The individual holding cells were designed to break the spirit of prisoners through isolation and sensory deprivation. Each cell was barely large enough for a human to lie down, with walls that seemed to absorb sound and light in unnatural ways. The Zephyrians had learned that separating social species like humans made them more vulnerable to psychological pressure, more willing to cooperate in exchange for contact with their fellow prisoners. Sarah Chun was the first to be taken for interrogation. Her cell door dilated like a biological iris, and 2 Zephyrian guards escorted her through corridors that seemed to pulse with alien life. Her scientific mind couldn't help but analyze what she was seeing, even through her terror. The station's bioarchitecture was incredibly advanced, suggesting a civilization that had mastered the integration of technology and living tissue in ways that human science could barely comprehend. The interrogation chamber was a nightmare of organic curves and mechanical precision. Restraint systems grew from the floor like metallic vines, wrapping around Sarah's arms and legs with gentle but unbreakable strength. Bioluminescent panels provided harsh illumination that shifted in frequency, designed to cause discomfort in human vision. The air itself seemed charged with electricity, making every breath feel like inhaling lightning. Subcommander Veltar entered the chamber with the fluid grace characteristic of his species. His exoskeleton gleamed under the shifting lights, and his compound eyes reflected the chamber's glow like a dozen tiny suns. When he spoke, his mandibles clicked in rhythm with his words, creating an unsettling percussion that echoed off the curved walls. Dr. Sarah Chun, he said, reading from a bioscanner in his hand. Xenobiologist, 26 standard years old, recently graduated from the Mars Academy with honors in astrobiology and interspecies communication. You were traveling to the Kepler 442 system to study potential bacterial life on the 4th planet. Sarah's heart raced as she realized how much information the aliens had already extracted from the ship's computers. "I'm just a scientist," she whispered. "I don't know anything about military secrets or colony defenses." Veltar's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Knowledge is knowledge, soft one. Your understanding of human biology and psychology will be most useful. But first, tell me about your companions." The old healer, Webb, seems straightforward enough. But the other three males intrigue me. There is something different about them. "Different how?" Sarah asked, genuinely confused. To her, Jake, Alex, and Tom had seemed like ordinary working men, perhaps a bit more serious than average, but nothing that stood out as unusual. Their biometric readings during capture showed anomalous patterns, Veltar explained, his scanner displaying complex waveforms that meant nothing to Sarah. Heart rate variability consistent with advanced stress conditioning. Muscle density measurements suggesting extensive physical training. Neural activity patterns that indicate tactical assessment rather than panic responses. Sarah's scientific mind began to process this information even as fear clouded her thoughts. The aliens had detected something about her fellow passengers that she had missed entirely. But what could it mean? Jake had mentioned doing construction work on colony worlds, which would explain physical conditioning. Alex had been quiet during the journey, but that didn't necessarily indicate anything sinister. "I really don't know," she said honestly. "We were just passengers on the same ship. I barely spoke to them during the journey." The interrogation continued for what felt like hours, with Veltar probing for any detail that might provide insight into human psychology, biology, or technology. Sarah found herself answering questions about human social structures, educational systems, and scientific methods. Much of what she told them was available in any public database, but the aliens seemed particularly interested in understanding human emotional responses and decision-making processes. Meanwhile, 3 cells away, Alex Kane was using the isolation period to conduct his own intelligence-gathering operation. Years of SEAL training had taught him how to extract information from his environment even under the most restrictive conditions. The cell's biowalls responded to touch with subtle changes in color and texture, suggesting they were equipped with sensory systems. By carefully mapping these responses, he was building a mental picture of the monitoring systems that kept track of prisoners. The gravity in his cell was slightly heavier than the common areas, probably designed to cause fatigue and discomfort over extended periods. The air circulation followed a pattern that suggested the ventilation systems were centralized, possibly vulnerable to disruption if the right knowledge and tools could be brought to bear. Most importantly, the sound dampening wasn't perfect. By pressing his ear to specific points on the walls, Alex could hear faint echoes of activity in adjacent areas. When the guards came for him, Alex offered no resistance, maintaining his cover as a civilian passenger who had resigned himself to captivity. The escort route provided valuable intelligence about the station's layout, including the locations of guard posts, security checkpoints, and what appeared to be armory access points. His trained memory cataloged every detail for future reference. Alex's interrogation chamber was different from Sarah's, equipped with more sophisticated restraint systems and monitoring equipment. The Zephyrians clearly suspected he was more than he appeared, but their understanding of human deception was limited. They could detect physiological stress responses, but they couldn't interpret the complex mental conditioning that allowed elite soldiers to compartmentalize information and emotions. Commander Zach Th conducted this interrogation personally, his massive frame dominating the chamber as he studied the human strapped to the biomechanical chair. "Alexander Kane," he said, reading from a more detailed scanner than his subordinate had used. Age 34, listed occupation as security consultant. Interesting choice of profession for someone traveling to a remote colony world. "Work is work," Alex replied calmly. "Colony worlds need security just like anywhere else. Pirates, wild animals, equipment failures that could endanger settlements. Someone has to keep people safe." Zach Th's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "Yes, but your biometric profile suggests training far beyond civilian security work. Your muscle fiber composition indicates exposure to high-gravity combat conditioning. Your neural activity patterns show tactical thinking even under stress. You are a warrior, human, though you pretend otherwise." Alex met the alien's compound gaze steadily. I've done some military service, sure. Most humans have. Universal conscription for colony defense. But that was years ago. I'm just trying to make a living now. The interrogation techniques the Zephyrians employed were sophisticated, combining psychological pressure with physiological discomfort. The restraint systems could apply precise amounts of pain without causing permanent damage, while bioscanners monitored every aspect of the subject's physical and mental state. What they didn't understand was that humans like Alex had been trained to withstand far worse than anything the aliens could devise. Every question revealed information about Zephyrian intelligence gathering capabilities and strategic interests. They wanted to know about human military organization, colony defense systems, and fleet movements. They were particularly interested in the location and strength of frontier settlements, information that would be invaluable for planning future raids. Alex provided carefully crafted responses that contained enough truth to seem credible while misdirecting the aliens away from sensitive information. His supposed military service became exaggerated stories about basic training and routine patrol duties. His knowledge of frontier defenses was portrayed as secondhand information from bar conversations and news reports. Hours passed before Alex was returned to his cell, leaving the Zephyrians with the impression that they had broken a former soldier down to reveal useful intelligence about human military capabilities. In reality, every detail he had shared was either public knowledge or carefully constructed misinformation designed to waste their time and resources. Jake Morrison's interrogation followed a similar pattern, though his Marine training allowed him to approach the problem from a different angle. Where Alex had played the role of a burned-out veteran trying to forget his military past, Jake presented himself as a working-class hero who had served his time and now just wanted to build something with his hands. Construction work on colony worlds is dangerous, Jake explained to Subcommander Veltar, who had been assigned to extract information about human industrial capabilities. You're working with heavy equipment in environments that can kill you in a dozen different ways. Sure, I stayed in shape and learned to think tactically. You have to, or you don't survive. The Zephyrians found Jake's story convincing because it aligned with their understanding of human expansion patterns. Colony worlds did indeed require extensive construction work, and the conditions were genuinely hazardous. What they failed to recognize was the depth of tactical knowledge that Jake casually displayed while describing construction projects that involved securing landing sites and establishing defensive positions. Tom Bradley's interrogation proved the most challenging for the aliens, because his technical expertise was both valuable and dangerous to reveal. He walked a careful line between demonstrating enough knowledge to seem credible while hiding the advanced training that would have marked him as a military specialist. Electronic systems break down constantly on frontier worlds, Tom explained when questioned about his technical skills. Different gravity, radiation exposure, temperature extremes that Earth-built equipment wasn't designed for. Someone has to keep the life support running and the communication arrays functional. The Zephyrians were particularly interested in human computer systems and encryption methods, areas where Tom's actual expertise far exceeded what he could safely reveal. He provided detailed explanations of obsolete systems and civilian-grade equipment while carefully avoiding any mention of military-grade technology or advanced cryptographic techniques. Dr. Webb's interrogation focused on human medical knowledge and biological vulnerabilities. The elderly physician found himself answering questions about human physiology that made him deeply uncomfortable, particularly when the aliens showed obvious interest in biological weapons and torture techniques. His medical ethics compelled him to provide accurate information when lives might be at stake. But his growing suspicions about his fellow passengers made him increasingly careful about what he revealed. After 3 days of individual interrogations, the Zephyrians believed they had extracted significant intelligence about human capabilities and weaknesses. Their analysis indicated that humans were physically inferior to most spacefaring species, relied heavily on technology to compensate for biological limitations, and could be effectively broken through isolation and moderate physical discomfort. What they had actually accomplished was providing 3 highly trained human warriors with detailed intelligence about Zephyrian security procedures, station layout, guard rotations, and technological capabilities. More importantly, they had demonstrated their own overconfidence and lack of understanding about human psychology and military doctrine. The aliens made their first serious mistake when they decided to use group psychological pressure as the next phase of their interrogation process. They returned all 5 humans to a common holding area, believing that threatening one would make the others more cooperative. This decision would prove to be the beginning of their downfall, because it gave the 3 soldiers the opportunity to coordinate their efforts and begin planning an escape that would become a legend in both human and alien military circles. The common holding area was larger than the individual cells, designed to house multiple prisoners while maintaining psychological pressure through overcrowding and lack of privacy. The walls were the same biomechanical construction as the rest of the station, but here they included viewing panels that allowed guards to observe the prisoners at all times. The Zephyrians believed that reuniting the humans would make them more emotionally vulnerable and easier to manipulate. They could not have been more wrong. The moment the force field sealed behind them, Sarah Chun noticed a subtle but dramatic change in her fellow prisoners. Jake Morrison, who had seemed like a simple construction worker during their journey, now moved with the fluid precision of a predator. Alex Kane's relaxed demeanor shifted into something that reminded her of coiled steel, ready to spring into action at a moment's notice. Even Tom Bradley, the quiet technician, carried himself differently, his eyes constantly scanning their environment with professional assessment. "We need to talk," Alex said quietly, his voice carrying an authority that hadn't been there during their civilian conversations. "But not here. Too many sensors, too much surveillance." Dr. Webb looked confused by the sudden change in dynamics, but his medical training had taught him to observe human behavior, and what he was seeing now made him reassess everything he thought he knew about his fellow passengers. "Who are you people?" he whispered. "Later," Jake replied, settling into a position that gave him clear lines of sight to all the cell's access points. "First, we need to establish secure communication." Tom was already working on that problem, using techniques that Sarah's scientific mind couldn't even begin to understand. He had dismantled several of the small electronic devices he carried, salvaging components that he began connecting in ways that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Within minutes, he had constructed something that looked like a cross between a radio and a medical scanner. "Signal dampener," he explained when he noticed Sarah staring. "Creates a localized interference field that should mask our conversation from their listening devices. Range is only about 2 meters, so we need to stay close." The 5 humans huddled together in the center of the cell, their voices barely above whispers despite Tom's electronic countermeasures. What Sarah learned in the next few minutes changed her understanding of everything that had happened since their capture. Alex Kane, United States Navy SEALs, 12 years active service, classified operations across 7-star systems. Alex began, his introduction delivered with military precision. Current status is technically civilian contractor, but once a SEAL, always a SEAL. Jake Morrison, United States Marine Corps, 8 years service including 2 deployments in the vegan conflict, and classified operations in the Centauri sector, Jake added. Currently working construction, but that's just a day job. Tom Bradley, United States Army Rangers, 6 years active duty followed by 4 years special operations support. Current employment with Frontier Security Solutions, which is a polite way of saying I fix things that aren't supposed to break, and break things that aren't supposed to work, Tom concluded with a grim smile. Dr. Webb and Sarah exchanged glances that mixed amazement with growing hope. "So you're saying," Sarah whispered, "that 3 of the 5 random passengers on our transport ship just happened to be elite military specialists?" "Not random," Alex corrected. "Jake and I were both heading to the same colony world for the same security contract. Tom was probably working a related assignment. The universe has a sense of humor, but it's not usually that coincidental. What kind of security contract requires a Navy SEAL and a Marine?" Dr. Webb asked, his medical mind putting together implications that made him uncomfortable. "The kind where someone expects serious trouble," Jake replied. "The Kepler 442 system has been hit by 3 Zephyrian raids in the past 2 years. The colonial government finally decided to hire real protection instead of relying on local militia." Tom's signal dampener chimed softly, indicating that their conversation time was limited. "Equipment check," he said, moving to practical concerns. What do we have to work with? The inventory was depressingly small. The Zephyrians had been thorough in their search, confiscating anything that looked remotely like a weapon or tool. What they had missed were the items that appeared to be personal effects or medical supplies, things that seemed harmless but could be repurposed by people with the right knowledge and training. Dr. Webb's medical kit had been returned to him after the aliens determined it contained nothing dangerous. What they had failed to realize was that several common medical supplies could be combined to create explosive compounds, paralytic agents, or even improvised weapons. His knowledge of alien physiology, gained during years of treating colonists who had encountered various species, included information about Zephyrian vulnerabilities that could prove crucial. Sarah's scientific equipment included devices for analyzing atmospheric composition, soil samples, and biological specimens. In the right hands, some of these instruments could be modified for entirely different purposes. Her xenobiology training also provided insights into alien behavioral patterns and social structures that could be exploited. The three soldiers had maintained small caches of specialized equipment that had been overlooked because they were designed to appear as common personal items. Alex carried what looked like a simple multi-tool, but was actually a military-grade survival kit with capabilities far beyond its apparent function. Jake had a few pieces of jewelry that were actually concealed communication devices and micro-tools. Tom's electronic components could be combined with other materials to create surveillance equipment, jamming devices, or even improvised weapons. Escape timeline? Alex asked, shifting into operational planning mode. 48 hours maximum, Jake replied. These interrogations are just the beginning. Once they decide we don't have any more useful information, we'll be transferred to a labor camp or simply eliminated. Either way, we don't want to be here when that decision gets made. Station layout? Tom inquired. I've mapped approximately 30% of the facility based on movement patterns and acoustic analysis, Alex reported. Jake probably has different sections covered, and Tom's technical reconnaissance should fill in the gaps. The next hour was spent in detailed tactical planning, with each soldier contributing intelligence gathered during their individual interrogations. The picture that emerged was of a massive space station with sophisticated defenses, but several potential vulnerabilities that could be exploited by a small, highly trained team. Dr. Webb and Sarah found themselves assigned crucial roles in the escape plan. The doctor's medical knowledge would be essential for dealing with alien security systems that relied on biometric identification, while Sarah's scientific training made her the best choice for analyzing and potentially sabotaging the station's environmental controls. I'm not a soldier, Sarah protested when the full scope of their plan became clear. I study microorganisms and planetary ecosystems. I don't know anything about combat or sabotage. You know more than you think, Alex assured her. Intelligence gathering, pattern analysis, problem solving under pressure. Those are exactly the skills we need. Plus, you understand how biological systems work, and this entire station is essentially a massive organism. Tom nodded agreement. The Zephyrians think in terms of organic integration. Their technology isn't built, it's grown. That means it has biological vulnerabilities that Sarah can identify and exploit. Dr. Webb was more confident about his role, though he made his ethical concerns clear. I'll help you escape, and I'll defend innocent life, but I won't participate in unnecessary violence or actions that could harm non-combatant prisoners. Understood and respected, Jake replied. Our objective is escape and survival, not starting a war. We'll use minimum necessary force and avoid civilian casualties whenever possible. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of guards, indicating that the next phase of their captivity was about to begin. The 5 humans quickly separated, resuming their roles as confused and frightened prisoners while Tom discreetly concealed his improvised signal dampener. Subcommander Veltar entered the holding area with an escort of 6 heavily armed warriors, their weapons prominently displayed as a reminder of the prisoner's helpless situation. The commander has decided to accelerate your interrogation schedule, he announced. New techniques will be employed to extract information more efficiently. What he meant, though he didn't say it directly, was that the Zephyrians were preparing to use torture methods that would cause permanent harm to their prisoners. The intelligence gathered so far had been disappointing, and Higher command was pressuring the interrogation teams to produce better results. You will be separated again, Veltar continued, and subjected to enhanced questioning procedures. Those who cooperate will be treated with mercy. Those who resist will discover that Zephyrian patience has limits. Sarah genuinely shuddered at the threat, her fear providing perfect cover for the other prisoners' concealed preparations. Dr. Webb's face went pale, his medical knowledge making him acutely aware of what enhanced questioning might involve. The three soldiers maintained expressions of growing despair while internally switching to full combat readiness. As the guards moved to separate them once again, Alex caught Jake's eye and nodded almost imperceptibly. Phase 1 of their escape plan was complete. Intelligence had been gathered, resources had been cataloged, and roles had been assigned. Phase 2 would begin in exactly 18 hours, when the station's shift change would provide a narrow window of opportunity. What the Zephyrians failed to understand was that they had just made the worst mistake of their military careers. They had captured 3 of humanity's most elite warriors and given them time to plan, resources to work with, and motivation to succeed. The aliens thought they were dealing with soft, frightened creatures who would break under pressure. They were about to learn what happened when humans decided to stop pretending to be helpless. The guards escorted the prisoners toward their individual cells, unaware that they were leading 5 individuals who now represented the greatest threat the Zephyrian base had ever faced. In 18 hours, the careful balance of power that had existed for the past 3 days would shift dramatically, and the aliens would discover that capturing humans was easy. Keeping them captured was an entirely different matter.